You can make a case for a number of players. I don't think it'll be Harry Kane. I'm somewhat disappointed in Harry Kane, albeit that you can't criticise St Harry because of the position that he holds, but I'm getting a bit tired of him playing central midfield. This is One-2-One with Simon Jordan. Don't forget to, of course, keep liking and subscribing, and equally, if not more importantly, keep leaving the brilliant questions in the comment section below. But let's get on with this week's show. Depends what business. I mean, I am always against the idea that you buy players in January because you want to kick on. Very rarely does that happen. Yes, I know there's notable exceptions. Virgil van Dijk, Luis Suarez are exceptions that don't always prove a rule. Virgil van Dijk was attempted to be signed in the summer, and because of the situation where there was this tapping up scenario or player breaching the obligations that he had by talking to a club, even though he was under contract with the club and hadn't been given permission, kicked that transfer back into the long grass. Tottenham have spent £150 million in the summer. They spent £50 million in the last January transfer window. So I think Tottenham are good enough to get into the top four with what they got. But if Conte feels that they've got targets, and Conte feels that there's a logical reason behind buying in January, then I suspect Tottenham will back him to a degree. It's not just about Daniel Levy, it's about Joe Lewis, and it's about how Tottenham view the future. But you don't get a Rolls Royce in the garage and fill it up with Derv. And so if Conte wants players in January, I suspect he'll get them. The argument that's raging around VAR and the mistakes that humans are making, and we've discussed this previously about seemingly the only people that aren't allowed to make any mistakes are referees. Players, managers, owners, media, all make mistakes, but referees, they're on an island on their own. The argument that might be raging around Arsenal's inferiority complex that's building up, which by the way it shouldn't, because they're still very much in control of their own destiny. They have decisions like the Brentford decision on Saturday go against them, then they lose league titles. Well, I'm not in that camp. It's a 38-game season, albeit it's nip and tuck, and you can look back on previous seasons where it's been gone by points. Arsenal are in control of their own destiny. They're captains of their own ship. If they feel that they were wronged, then they'll put it right in the next game on Wednesday, which I'm going to go to actually and watch Arsenal versus Man City. I believe that referees, there needs to be a new direction that referees are talking to the media, not taken to task, but talk to the media about decisions that are made, whether it's what players have said to certain referees in games, or whether it's the reasons behind the decisions and how they've got them wrong. Obviously the idea, never much accepted by the football establishment, and I saw questions being levelled at Graham Potter, which was he gave an answer to a VAR or refereeing intervention, but the media weren't happy with that answer, so they came back again and asked him again so they can get the discerning, much discerning, the disquiet and the discontent from the manager amplified up. So if the manager doesn't want to talk about it in the first place, they'll make sure he does. And of course, with VAR, it was brought in to remove a vast swathe of so-called huge errors that were being made. I would suggest still that VAR gets more right than it does wrong. But you're not going to, until we move into artificial intelligence and take it away completely, it's utterly automated. So we're watching Tron control our games. We are going to have this element of errors still creeping in. Some of them are unfathomable. Some of them make no sense in terms of the quality of understanding from the adjudication inside Stockley Park. But I would hasten to add and wager that Howard Webb will get it slightly better. And we'll move it into a space where the communication, the accountability, because a while ago it was a lack of accountability or communication. Now we've got accountability and communication. Now that's not good enough. I understand that things pivot and change on the basis of individual decisions, but it's unreasonable and unnecessary to be consistently raining down on VAR and referees the way we are. We do it in such a way that is ultimately an unrealistic expectation. Even if you have the most technological things like your broadband, the business that provides you with your broadband will not guarantee you 100% of your time being up and available to use your Wi-Fi. And I know I'm going off on a piece, but I do think it's unreasonable, and I don't think Arsenal should have a claim, or anyone else should have a claim, for human error. Otherwise we'll spend our life involved in human error, and then we'll spend our life involved in situations where people start to challenge the situation, full stop, and you'll unwind the thread of the fabric of football. VAR is still evolving, it is still better and gets more decisions right than it gets wrong, but of course it needs to evolve, of course it does, and of course with someone like Howard Webb, who I believe can get things better, then I think we're on the right path. Well, he's certainly operating at a very high level in English football. I think it's very difficult to suggest that he's the best manager in world football when you've got a variety of other managers out there operating with different conditions and different circumstances in different leagues. But if we make the argument, and it's regularly made and sometimes not explored, that the Premier League is the best league in the world, certainly it's the best financial league, if you're currently top of the tree and you're weathering storms and you're coming back from what people, including me, perceived could have been a mortal blow towards your aspirations of winning the Premier League when you lost to Man City, the argument has to be advanced that you are in the conversation for being one of the best managers around at this moment in time. Of course, you have to close the deal, you have to seal the deal, and you have to be in a situation where you substantiate your potential into an achievement. Then we can have that conversation. But the whole nature of the Arteta effect, and I don't always quite like it, but I do appreciate it, the whole jumping nature of that Arsenal fan base now, that galvanised set of players, and that total and utter focus amongst the Arsenal fans about the support and belief. We've long gone now is the toxic background noise of people like Arsenal Fan TV that gained their currency predominantly by the opportunity for other people to rubberneck at their ridiculous rants at their own football club. There's more of a unity, and a lot of that has been created by Arteta, because irrespective of him jumping around like a demented jack-in-the-box, he's got everybody at it. And to some extent, I quite admired him jumping around and putting people in their place and standing up to the Klopps of the world. Because who give them and the other managers that were currently in front of him at the time the God-given right to have the monopoly about who does the most histrionics? So I think Arteta is making a reasonable case for being in the conversation right now as one of the best managers around. But a manager is judged over a period of time, not a moment in time. And Arteta is in this moment, and we'll see if he can close this deal. And if he can close this deal, then I would say that he will be, if there were an award, and I'm not sure if there is, and perhaps someone can point out if there is, for the best manager in world football, like a Ballon d'Or for the players, there would be an argument for Arteta to get it if he wins this Premier League. Only if he wins this Premier League. Yes, Ben White, Arsenal, if you look at Arsenal en masse, it's incredibly difficult not to be very much impressed with what they're doing. Ben White is a very, very capable centre-half, playing very well for Arsenal. He's a very elegant player in terms of he can play as well as he can defend. Yeah, there's an argument. Maguire's going to get in the England side, whether we like it or we don't, whether we feel that he's not merited his place, he's going to get there. If they're going to bring Conor Cody over him, then yeah, I can understand why there'd be some pushback to it. I mean, I think ultimately Southgate has already made his mind up, and I hope that Ben White is in that squad because I think he's good enough. And I don't think it's a case of giving up because one person sees it a different way to you. Ultimately, you'll see in a tournament how these players perform. It is true and fair to say, put aside Conor Cody, it's true and fair to say that very rarely has Harry Maguire let England down. And this campaign, this witch hunt for him, I think is a little unfair. I'm not an admirer of his. I don't think he's the greatest central defender we've ever produced. I don't think he's worth 80 million quid, but he didn't put that price tag on his head. And I also think when he talks to the media, he's so structured and formulaic that it doesn't make you feel that you're dealing with someone with any authenticity. But going back to the point, he's performed well in tournaments, and Southgate will want to bring a tournament team which he knows he can rely on. Now, whether he thinks Ben White falls into that category, because Ben White's a little bit like Southgate in terms of a player. He's not particularly overstated, he's very efficient in what he does, and he can play football, which Gareth could certainly do. Obviously, I watched him for many a year when he was at Palace before he was sold to Villa, and I know that he can play football, not just defend. So it's an interesting one, but I would have Ben White in over Conor Cody, definitely. I think Bruno Fernandes is one of those enigmas that you allow a little bit of dispensation for because they're very talented players. But are they going to get Man United where they need to be? Obviously, there was a lot of furore after the game with Graeme Souness landing his points and Gary Neville trying to find some sense of Man United's performance. Fernandes wasn't the leader that United needed, but then again, neither were the other 10 players on the pitch, to be honest. And I do think he should be consequenced for pushing the linesman, because I think we're trying to get some order in the game and some culture in respecting officials, and we're seeing it land into grassroots football, how people behave with officials, referees and linesmen. So I'm not particularly enamoured with that. But I think he's a lightweight. I think he falls over when he feels like it. I think he's one of those that's got a lot of ability, and that ability will be given as an excuse for other aspects of his game. Whether he's a captain or not, well, that's a bigger question. Technically, a very gifted player. His behaviour, you're right, Big Brody, is petulant and childish. It's not the kind of reaction you'd expect. You can't imagine people like Roy Keane, when they once upon a time were in the United lineup leading that team, and Keane talked about the dynamic of feeling that a circus was creeping back into town. I think Ten Hag will arrest that particular situation. I think Bruno Fernandes will be pulled up for either remonstrating about not being taken off, kicking out at Trent Alexander-Arnold, pushing linesmen, or generally having the body language of a lightweight. You can't encapsulate United's season into that drubbing. A lot of people make a lot of fun out of it. I think it'll be a good thing for United. I think it'll arrest the idea they're going to actually be in the Premier League title race, because they're not. And it'll give them more opportunity to square some circles that Ten Hag will clearly see the moment he gets stuck on top at certain times. The outcome was that. And there was a load of them out there. It wasn't just Fernandes. But Fernandes is the captain. Fernandes is the person that you're supposed to turn to that sets the temperature, sets the tone. And he did anything but that. So I think it was petulant. I think it was poor. But then again, you show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser. What you wanted to see was a little bit more resilience, a little bit more discipline, a little bit more fortitude, and a little bit more example. And to be quite honest with you, in that game, Fernandes did none of the above.